Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. Have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Many big stories, as per usual. So recession fears continue to mount after some comments from the Fed Chair Jerome Powell yesterday. A significant Tesla investor is now calling for Elon to step down as CEO. So a lot that's interesting going on there with Tesla. Ground invasion officially begins in Gaza. We'll take a look at what is going on there and the U.S. response. We've got a bunch of updates on the various court battles that are playing out, including how Elon is now giving money to Republicans who back his calls to impeach judges. Some new data is revealing the details of how exactly Democrats lost, and some really stunning information there to parse through. I'm taking a look at how Trump is punishing the state of Maine and what it could mean for you specifically in this new era. And we are officially entering abundance discourse. Derek Thompson is going to join us for an interview about his new book and the political theory that he is sharing here with Ezra Klein.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to him. This book, there's a lot of discourse around it.
Yes,
if you're not aware of that discourse, God bless you. You know, you're doing the right thing. You're staying out.
We're going to force you to be aware of it
That's
today,
for the nerds like us. You can enter in just a little bit, and that can be your own introduction. But like Krystal said, let's go ahead and get to the recession watch. So there have been some very interesting comments here from the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell about the possibility of recession, some worrying data. Let's take a listen.
There's always an unconditional possibility of a recession. It might be broadly in the range of 1 in 4 at any time. If you look back through the years, it could be within 12 months, a 1 in 4 chance of a recession. So the question is whether this current situation, those possibilities are elevated. I will say this: we don't make such a forecast. If you look at outside forecasts, forecasters have generally raised, a number of them have raised their possibility of a recession somewhat, but still at relatively moderate levels, still in the region of the traditional, because they were extremely low. If you go back 2 months, people were saying that the likelihood of a recession was extremely low. So has moved up, but it's not high. So let me say that it is going to be very difficult to have a precise assessment of how much of inflation is coming from tariffs and from other, and that's already the case. You may have seen that goods inflation moved up pretty significantly in the first 2 months of the year. Trying to track that back to actual tariff increases, given what was tariffed and what was not, very, very challenging. So some of it, the answer is clearly some of it, a good part of it.
So that was Federal Reserve Chairman. He's trying to tamp down any talk of recession, but he is saying that it is going up higher. Also talking there about inflation, key because, of course, Federal Reserve policy is deeply tied to inflation. This comes on the heels of a major announcement from the Trump administration, the readying of the biggest tariff regime now yet. Let's put it up there on the screen from Jeff Stein. Trump aides are prepping new tariffs on imports worth trillions for, quote, Liberation Day. So you'll all recall this was Donald Trump's promise from the State of the Union. He will be doing reciprocal tariffs, quote, quote from him was that it will be Liberation Day. He's doing it April 2nd and not April 1st because he doesn't want anyone to think that it's an April Fool's joke. The question is what exactly this is going to look like. And it's in implementation, it's genuinely all matters. So the idea behind it, I actually think is one I could get behind. The idea behind it is we will charge anyone a tariff that they charge for us. But the question is about, like with the USMCA and the automakers, is how much of a tariff and how many times? Because part of the problem is we live in a hyper-globalized economy where parts will often move across our border some 15 to 20 times before it will end up in a finished vehicle. Is it like the whole assembly will be subject to the tariff, or will it be one that is applied every single time? There's also, there's bigger questions here where even if in principle you could support a reciprocal tariff, there are some tariffs where reciprocity is eaten on the back end. So like for a car, for example, but we'll still have a trade surplus in another good. The idea is to try and equalize everything here, but the implementation of it is just almost certainly going to lead to a lot of tariffs. And that's just one where it comes on the heels of a story from the Trump administration so far, which has been chaotic. This one, I do think they have a better narrative on their side. Instead of like, we're bullying Canada to be the 51st state, we're like, listen, we're going to charge everybody what they charge us. But as as I always say, it has to be paired with a story. It cannot be one where people think that it's just going to lead to higher prices. We need to see some serious movement. There's been some. I mean, NVIDIA announced yesterday they're going to onshore some stuff, but it's not just about talk. You actually have to see some action.
Yeah.
You really need to have a lot of faith and a lot of trust. And considering how things have gone now for the first 60, 70 days of the Trump administration, by the time those go in, they are losing a lot of trust with the American public right now.
Yeah, I mean, they've already kind of given tariffs a bad name.
Yeah.
And so if they had started with like, we're doing, tit for tat. They have tariffs on us. We're going to do the same thing reciprocal. I do think that probably narrative would have landed better with the American public. But at this point, and I find this to be unfortunate because I'm actually worried about this just like killing the good name of tariffs for all time, because they are an important tool in order to build up, your industrial capacity or, emphasize key industries, et cetera. So an important tool to have in the arsenal, and they've sort of poisoned the very word tariffs already, in my opinion, in these early days of the administration. Either way, however you feel about them, it is, to Saagar's point, going to be if he follows through, et cetera, a significant increase in the tariff regime. I'm really not sure that Wall Street has entirely grappled with this, because I think they've always had this sense of, he doesn't really mean it, he's going to back off. And they have some reason to believe that at this point, since he has gone in and backed off partially, et cetera, multiple times at this point. So there could be, a huge reaction if he goes forward with, quote unquote, Liberation Day. I'm calling it L Day on April 2nd. Another thing I was reading about this morning is just in terms of the bigger picture of where we are economically. The Trump administration is betting that there is a decent amount of sort of economic buffer, because some of those macroeconomic numbers, coming out of the Biden administration were in fact good. Unemployment was really low, for example, and consumer sentiment was coming back up. But we know, because we're covering this the whole time, there were significant warning signs in the housing market. Like, the housing market has not been normal in a really long time. Things have been just kind of like frozen in place for years at this point. You also had a situation where consumers, yes, they were maintaining their spending level, but they were increasingly having to rely on credit cards in order to be able to do that. So that indicates that they aren't really in a position to absorb much of a shock at all if there is an economic downturn, if hiring does begin to freeze, if layoffs do start, if the stock market does continue its downward trajectory. So they may not have as much of a buffer zone as you might think if you were just looking at those top line macroeconomic numbers. On the other hand, consumer sentiment was pretty low during most of the Biden administration, and it did not actually lead to a decrease in consumer spending. So last time Saagar and I were talking about, this consumer sentiment index, that's really important, it's falling off a cliff, people are really nervous, their inflation expectations are high, et cetera. Oftentimes, that can lead to a sort of like self-fulfilling prophecy where, because consumers are nervous, they pull back, and retailers are looking at that consumer sentiment and they're pulling back as well. But that is not always the case. So, there's a lot of mixed signals here, but I don't think there's any doubt that if they move forward to the full extent on April 2nd, there is going to be a significant blow. And I mean, Jerome Powell said as much, in his very Federal Reserve chairs, their whole thing is to be as sort of neutral and non-inflammatory as possible, because they know how closely everybody parses every single word. But basically, he's like, tariffs lead to more inflation and lower growth. That's what we are increasingly expecting, is growth to be lower than what was previously projected, and for us to have to worry more about inflation. I just saw Saagar this morning. Trump is out. Of course, he's very upset. He wants the Federal Reserve to cut rates, et cetera, to help him with his tariff policy. And right now, the Fed is not going along with that.
Fed's still in a quote, wait and see policy. And I am worried too just about all these crazy shocks to the market, because what you'll have is stocks were up yesterday on the Fed chairman's talk about not lack of recession, about possibility of cutting rates, but then you could have a major tariff regime, and then the Federal Reserve would try and come in, maybe save the economy and cut rates low. We just have this chaos. That's what people don't want to see. And you're starting to see some pushback. I mean, mainly, it's not just Wall Street, I would say. It's really the financial press itself is just having a lot of difficulty dealing with all of this. So here's Maria Bartiromo from Fox Business, by no means somebody who is adversarial usually to the Trump administration. But, you got to watch this versus her Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. Let's take a listen.
And they have substantial tariffs, and as important as the tariff are some of these non-tariff barriers where they have domestic content production, where they do testing on whether it's our food or products that bear no resemblance to safety or anything that we do to their products.
See, these are the things that people are really worried about, because they first thought it was just about trade. Then they thought it was just about fentanyl. Then after that, we talked about, well, maybe it's currency manipulation, and maybe it's now you're talking about food testing. And when I bring up the issue of clarity, that's what I'm talking about, and that's what I'm hearing from corporate America, that we're not sure where this is going. But of course, we will get resolution on April 2nd, rather.
So you could see there, that's about as light pushback, I think, as you're going to get, but it's still important. And keeping with this, you have the chief economist here of Moody's, who has recently been giving an interview. Now, why does it matter? Remember, everybody, Moody's, everybody on Wall Street looks to them, downgrading of debt, their forecast. Those forecasts get incorporated by the analysts. The analysts then put that into their overall projections. And then sometimes projections can be fulfilling because it will cause people either to sell off or to pare back or to hoard cash, a la Warren Buffett style. So here he is, the chief economist of Moody's, talking about recession. Let's take a listen.
There's a lot of talk about reciprocal tariffs. That's broad-based tariffs coming into effect in a couple of weeks, I think, early April. If that actually happens and those tariffs stay in place for any length of time, couple, 3, 4, 5 months, I think that's enough to push the economy into recession, given everything else that's going on. So, this would be a really weird recession, right? I mean, it's recession by design. The economy came into the year rip-roaring, exceptionally strong, and we're pushing it in because of policy. It just doesn't feel like, that's the direction we need to go.
Look, that's Wall Street. It could be wrong. We also could have the old Trump, we're doing this, and then we're not doing this, so we have no idea. They could pull back. I mean, that's part of what I always think is that the danger always is that if you have a tariff regime and you go to the bat for tariffs, but then you pull back, you both get the market reaction to tariffs and then you don't get any of the benefit of tariffs. That's the problem. So I am worried about this just in the sense of this has to be implemented properly. It needs to have a plan, and it needs to be paired with something real. It's not just NVIDIA and OpenAI giving talks. Look, I think it's great that NVIDIA is going to onshore hundreds of millions of dollars, but let's look at reality from the CHIPS Act and all that. Yes, it definitely helped, but a lot of that money did not go to a lot of the declining states. It's states that were already open for business and that were kind of booming, places like Arizona, right? Yeah, look, I have nothing against Arizona, I'm glad, but part of the whole idea behind tariffs, why the UAW and others support them, is also to revitalize areas that are economically declining, and we have not seen that as of yet from the states of Ohio, Pennsylvania, of Michigan. A lot of the economic growth, if you look in Pennsylvania, a lot of it is healthcare, which that's a problem, I think, as that's not really a tariff thing that you can necessarily solve without some direct government intervention. So look, they're playing with shaky ground.
Yeah.
And if you screw with people's money, they're going to get mad. And it's one of those where you could both do damage to yourself in the future, and you may both go to the bat for something and then end up losing, which in my opinion puts you in all the worst worlds.
I mean, in terms of the politics of this, we are in very unusual territory with regard to Donald Trump, where his numbers on the economy right now are some of his lowest numbers.
Yes.
And it comes at a time when the economy, cost of living, inflation, the importance of that to Americans is only going up right now. So the fact that he is, being seen right now increasingly as failing to deliver on what was one of the core promises of his campaign, and what has always been one of the core promises of him as a leader and as a political candidate, it's a big issue for him. And you couple that with, you're talking about, the reconciliation coming down, big tax cuts for the rich, cuts probably to Medicaid, a tax on Social Security that people are very concerned about. In fact, the data segment that we'll probably get to today, assuming that we don't talk too long in these other blocks, one of the things they found is that the most effective message right now about Trump is he's cutting taxes for the rich and cutting your Social Security and your Medicare. So a lot of perilous political ground that he's on right now.
Yes, that's right. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.